everyone, it's technology expert Burton Kelso here with another tech tip to help you get the most out of the technology in your life. Today we're talking about how to put together a great webinar studio in 2021. I constantly get questions from people on what things they need to do in order to create a good webinar studio. With the pandemic running on, more people are trying to get the word out about their business and to connect with people by doing webinars. Of course, there's a ton of topics that you can do when it comes to a webinar, but the first thing, before you even jump on the internet and start posting that stuff, is how are you going to put together a good studio in order to do your webinar? Now, if I were to give you advice, I would tell you that you can do your webinar anywhere, that you don't necessarily need a studio with the setup in order to create a webinar. Because one of the important things about webinars is that the idea is to connect with people, and to build a connection you have to be your authentic self, and that includes how you dress, how you act, whether you stumble over words, or even if you have an environment that just doesn't look so polished. Obviously, you don't want to have a junky environment, but you want to have an environment that says that it is you and helps you connect with more of your followers. I'll get to backgrounds in a second. Um, and one of the reasons I hesitate is because of my background that I have behind me. It's cobbled together from bits and pieces, but it represents different aspects of myself. But there are some major things that you need to concentrate on in order to ensure that your studio is going to be set up. That is, if you have a studio. More your focus should be on what type of equipment that you have versus the overall look and feel of your studio. So there are 5 things that you need to make sure that you are on top of before you get started with your webinar studio and your webinars. So let's take a look at some of the things that you should focus on when it comes to your webinar and what you need to do this year to make it the best ever. So number 1 is obviously your internet speed. You want the maximum amount of internet speed that is available to your area to make sure that you don't have any interruptions in your webinar. Now, sometimes internet speed doesn't always come into play if you are doing a webinar, because you may not be always live streaming. So I will say that if you know for a fact that you have slow internet in your area, then it's probably a good idea to pre-record your videos and then to upload those to the internet. Now, the challenge with slow internet is that your upload speed is going to be pretty darn slow, but recording in advance can be just as good as doing live. May not have the reach, but it's still a good idea to get those out there. But internet speed plays a big role regardless if you're doing live view versus a pre-recorded video. So one of the best utilities that you can use out there as far as making sure that you have robust internet is my favorite tool and website, which is speedtest.net. Now, speedtest.net unfortunately throws up a ton of ads, but at its core, which is the center here, you can check to see if you have good internet. Now, one of the things when you visit speedtest.net is that you will get a go button. We'll also give out your IP address and your internet provider. Now, once you click on the go button, it will let you know what your internet speeds are. But before I click on go, I need to tell you what you're looking for. As far as internet speeds, you want high-speed internet. And what is constituted by the FCC and other entities as far as fast internet is a download speed of at least 25 megabits per second and an upload speed of at least 5 megabits per second. If you are experiencing these speeds, then you aren't going to have any problems with your live streaming when you do your internet, and your upload should not take that long either. So let's go ahead and click on the go button on speedtest.net and get rid of some of these pesky ads. And as you can see, my internet is not as robust as it should be with Google Fiber. With the speed coming into the offices at Integral, this computer is on wireless. So obviously the needle would be buried if I had a wired connection into this computer. But with the internet speeds that I'm pulling, obviously it's good enough to do a live stream, and I normally don't have any problems unless there is an outage in the area. So the speeds that I currently am getting are download speed of 41.65 and 33.34, which are good enough to stream live video, and we're on the start as far as what I need to have as far as a nice webinar studio. Now, one of the other things that you need to look into is, should you run a wired cable to your computer or devices, or should you go wireless? Now, I know a lot of you out there are using your laptops in order to live stream, or even your smartphones, because you're not limited to just using a computer to do live stream. You can do live stream or do video from your smartphone and upload it as well. If you are having issues with your Wi-Fi in your studio where you want to record, which is kind of one of the things that I'm experiencing with the slower speeds that I have, my home studio is in an office in the basement. So, and it's across the house from the router. So obviously I'm not getting the speeds that I should be getting, but obviously those speeds are good enough to do a webinar. So check that out on your end before you go into what I'm about to recommend as far as things to improve your Wi-Fi connection. So if you're one of those people that home office is in an odd area, then you probably need to invest in either a mesh network to get those weak areas of your home filled with robust Wi-Fi internet, or you can even go with a wireless range extender, which will also help boost those weak areas in your webinar studio in order to give you fast internet. Worst case scenario, you may have to run a cable from your router to your device, if the device will even take it, or you may have to move the location of your webinar studio. Just depends on how your setup is. Now, obviously, it's more convenient if you can run your webinar studio with your devices wireless, but most people that do webinars highly recommend that you run a solid cable from your router directly to your device so that you can minimize the interruptions that you may have when it comes to doing a live broadcast when you're on your webinar, or even slowing down your upload when you're trying to upload your video to the internet or to YouTube. So the next piece of utility you need in order to have a webinar studio is a good microphone, and I have to recommend the Blue Yeti microphone, or the Yeti series of mics, because I own one. And let me see if I can pick it up without losing the signal or even my microphone. So there you have it. There's the Yeti. I don't want to pull it too far because it is plugged in, but that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm using for a microphone. And obviously it's still working because we're still getting sound. But Yeti makes a great microphone for web studios. You can also get the Yeti snow cone microphone, which is a good alternative to use. But most people that I know that do webinars are using some form of Yeti microphone in order to do their live stream or to set up their webinar studio. Now, keep in mind, if you're doing your webinars on something like this, then obviously you can't hook up a Yeti to your smartphone. Now, most smartphones have good enough mics that if you're doing a webinar from your smartphone, then you can just make sure you're in a quiet area and just use the microphone built into your iPhone or into your Android phone and not have to worry about it. But if you, it really makes sense to utilize some form of computer as opposed to doing your webinar studio with a smartphone. But if a smartphone is the fastest device that you have, then you definitely can use it and not have to worry about anything. So obviously this next one is kind of obvious, but you need a good webcam. And the webcam that I'm using is a Logitech C920. And I will say, when it comes to webcams for external desktop and laptop use, Logitech leads the way as far as webcams are concerned. Now, the good thing about the Logitech C920 is that it is a price-friendly webcam. Usually retails between $60 and $80, but it's very easy to hook up, and it's versatile because it will connect to any computer out there. That also means for you Mac users that are out there. One of the reasons why you might consider purchasing a higher end or high def webcam is that your current laptop computer may not have a good quality webcam. It's especially true if you're working with older devices. I'm always of the mindset when it comes to computers that you don't always have to go out and buy the latest and greatest. So if you're nursing an older computer and you want to start a webinar and have your web studio, it's easier to buy external devices like a microphone or a camera than it is to go out and buy a whole new computer, because a computer with a high def camera is probably going to cost you a minimum of at least $600. But if you can spend at least $120 on a Yeti microphone and spend at least $80 on a Logitech webcam, then that's going to put you ahead of the game as to having to go out and buy new equipment. And one of the things that I'm trying to stress here is that you don't always have to buy new equipment when it comes to setting up a webinar studio or getting started with webinars. The best thing you want to do when it comes to webinars is to make sure you have your minimum equipment. Then once you get established with doing webinars, you can go out and splurge a little on your equipment. So the next piece of equipment that we need to talk about is lighting. And lighting can come in all varieties, forms, shapes. It doesn't matter. Most people, as you can see from this photo, will go with a ring type of light because it puts out good quality. And also another thing that you would notice from this piece of clip art is that this photo has someone using a regular camera and looks like a Canon in order to record their videos as opposed to their laptop sitting there. So again, if you do have a laptop that doesn't have a good quality camera, use what you got or go out and not spend a lot of money on a webcam. It's perfectly okay. It's better than buying new equipment, right? But lighting, you're going to laugh. You're probably wondering what I'm using. I can't get the light, but I can kind of show you an idea of what I'm using for lighting. And yes, folks, I do have a lamp with no lampshade on it as the lighting that I do for all of the live videos that I do. In fact, it's a Philips smart lamp or smart light that I could control with my voice, but I'm not going to for the sake of this video. But it's very easy to find different ways to get lighting in your webinar studio. One of the things when it comes to lighting is also make sure when you're doing webinar studios that you have a solid background behind you. If you're sitting in front of a window, that definitely can ruin light. If you don't have access to expensive lighting but have a well-lit room, make sure that you are facing the window as opposed to letting it be at your back in order to ensure that you have good quality lighting. There's all sorts of scenarios that I've seen with lighting with webinars and webinar studios. Again, a webinar studio doesn't necessarily have to be a dedicated room that you are doing your webinars in. It just needs to be set up so that you have decent lighting, you've got the good equipment, which almost, I should say, leads us to our final element to having a good webinar studio, and that is your background. Now, when people think of webinar studios, they think of all sorts of backgrounds that they can do, but you can kind of cheat and make your own background like I did before. The action figures that you see behind me are a combination of action figures that I've collected recently and a combination of some of my boys' toys. For example, down in the lower, I would say my right hand side where I might move my arm, Buzz, Woody, and Jesse are toys that my boys had for many years that I just decided to use for my props for webinar. The old Sony TV that you see behind me that has a current Windows background, that was my kids' computer, or not computer, but their monitor in their room that I just used for a background. Not using the best display of it, but at least it gives the background a little bit of color. Same thing with Ecto 1 that's behind me and the red stapler that's there. It's just stuff that just kind of adds a little bit of fun and personality to your webinar, and people comment on it all the time. Now, as far as the green screen that I showed earlier and virtual screens that you might want to do with some of your Zoom webinars, I would say forego that, because those backgrounds look pretty funky when you're doing a webinar. You can see the outline of you. Maybe your wall isn't like a green screen, and let's face it, most green screens that you purchase are large, and you may not have the space to put up a green screen. So just utilize whatever you have at your disposal. You could be sitting or using a background with a bookshelf behind you. You could have a blank wall, which is what I started out with. Also, you can set up different photos, but just as long as it reflects you and makes it a little bit warm and fuzzy as far as the studio feel of your webinar studio, and you'll do okay. The main thing that I want to stress in this video is that don't spend a lot of money at first when it comes to your webinar studio. Get up and running with your webinar and get a routine established. Then once you establish a routine, then you can add a little bit odds and ends and spend a little bit more on equipment to add a little bit more polish to your webinar studio. So with that said, if you have comments and questions about how to set up a webinar studio, leave them in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you to give you tips on what I did to get an effective webinar studio. True story, when I first started doing live video, I used to hold my smartphone, if you could believe it, for about 10 to 15 minutes, and I got some muscles out of doing that. But it was still pain in the butt because stupid me didn't think about why not just go and buy out a phone tripod. But I was trying to do would be best and save money and make sure that I was going to get established in that routine. So there's a little trivia out there for you. So if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to, I always point the wrong way, to your friends and family. If you want to find more content like this, be sure to subscribe to myself, Burton Kelso, the technology expert, on YouTube and all of the other social media channels, as well as my company Integral. We have tons of tech tip videos and tips and tricks that are designed to help you get more from the technology that you use at home and at work. So I love technology. I've read all the manuals, and I'm serious about making technology fun and easy to use for everyone. So take care of yourself and do many things to make you smile. And thanks for watching.